Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Vervo webinar. Look, we've given you all a few minutes to join, so we won't do our usual, let's just wait 5 minutes and see if people come, because people are here, which is great. So welcome, everyone. Look, today's a really fun one for us because we're kind of talking about exactly what we do here at Vervo, which is pre-employment skills assessments. As many of you know, skills assessments are an incredibly powerful tool for hiring, allowing hirers to assess the abilities of candidates to complete job-related tasks, test hard and soft skills, and do it all in a way that, when done well, is a great candidate experience and helps you find the right person for the job and confidently hire. But while skills assessments have a lot of potential, their effectiveness can be sometimes hindered a little bit if they're not used in the best way possible. And so in this session, we're going to talk about how exactly to do that with two experts. Jennifer Shelliff is Vervo's VP of Customer Success, and Stacey Garland is Vervo's Behavioral Science Lead. And they're with me today. It's an all Vervo, all skills assessment session. Stacey and Jen, hi. Thanks for joining me.
Hello, long time no see.
Happy to be here.
Stacey, where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Melbourne, Australia.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. You tend to travel around a little bit lately, but yeah, cool. And Jen, where are you?
I am in Dallas, Texas. It's very hot right now, but trying to keep cool.
Actually, you were telling me the temperature the other day, and I wasn't aware that you were talking in Celsius, not Fahrenheit. What's the temperature kind of average been there?
So ever since I started working with an Australian company, I've started to use different types of metrics, right? The Celsius, but so for the Australians online, it's been around 43, 45 degrees. It's gone up to close to 48. So anywhere from 104 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Super hot.
That's wild. It's the opposite of what's happening at the moment where I am in Melbourne as well, Stacey. All right, so this is going to be an interesting session. This is all about kind of telling people how they can kind of get the most out of skills assessments and the sort of tips and tricks, the sort of cheat sheet to really unlock the potential of using skills assessments. So let's get into it with a big, broad question, which is, what exactly are skills assessments? Who wants to take this one?
Okay.
Stacey, you want to go?
Yeah. So skills assessments are assessment, obviously, testing candidates' skills. The way that we test skills is very different to a lot of other companies because we essentially have a real life job preview. So we're actually getting candidates to solve challenges or solve problems and actually do work samples that are relevant to the role that they're applying for. That makes it easier for employer or hiring manager or talent acquisition to see, can someone actually do the job without looking at their resume. And for a candidate, it's also a really good opportunity to actually be able to apply those skills and see what the job is like before they get the job. So skills assessments really are testing on the job skills in the context of the role and the context of the organization. For example, a sales job for one company might look very different to a sales job in another company. So we want to make sure that we're testing the right skills in that context to get the right people in the right job.
Yeah, so when we talk about testing, tests, assessments, what exactly are these skills assessments? I know there's a few different ones on the market, including Vervo's, obviously, which we'll talk about, but how are they different from, like a questionnaire or a quiz or a Google form that's just got a bunch of, prompts in it?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of those are self-report. So we're actually asking someone, do you have this, or other ones, not Vervo, ask, do you have these skills, or how would you rate your skills out of 10 in this area? And there's a lot of bias that comes into that from a personal level, from someone actually doing the self-report measure, whether they have that self-awareness or whether they're honest about their skills. Vervo, we're actually not asking them if they're good at a skill, we're actually getting them to apply the skill. So if it's for communication, we're actually asking them to write an email or asking them to make a phone call or asking them to do a sales deck, for example, rather than just asking them we're actually getting them to do the work samples rather than asking them questions about their ability, which is prone to bias from a personal level of that self-awareness, but also from an interviewee or someone reading that as receptive. There's also bias in that as well. So it differs in the way that we're not actually asking people, can they do it? We're actually getting them to do it.
Right. Well, with that said, you kind of mentioned some of the things that you can ask in there. Let's take, Vervo as an example. Well, what types of questions can you then ask in a skills assessment? Like if you're testing, skills like communication, how do you do that? And what's the potential? Is it all text-based? Is it all video-based?
Yeah, good question. And that really depends on the role. So communication for one role would look very different to communication in another. So communication for an engineer is going to look very different to communication for a salesperson or customer success person, for example. So we'd actually get them to do show communication in the way that they're having to use it in the role. So that would be text-based if they're having to write emails or write in Slack or messaging their colleagues. It would also be audio. So if they're on the phone a lot, we'd get them to do some audio responses. And then if they're in a client-facing role, we would get them to do one or two video questions as well. So we're actually able to see their verbal communication skills, their presentation skills as well, and how they hold themselves while they're communicating. I wouldn't recommend doing video heavy or video questions for an engineer because they're not necessarily having that face-to-face client contact. So that communication would look very different. So communication is a very broad skill, and we'd want to be testing that in multiple different ways that are relevant to the job that they're doing. So that would include text, audio, maybe video if that's a requirement, but candidates don't love video, and that can also bring in quite a bit of bias. So I would recommend limiting video in an assessment and only using video for roles where they're having to have that face-to-face contact.
Yeah, I was going to ask a little bit about the right range of question types, but you mentioned there that it sounds like it's a made to fit for the particular role and skills that you're testing. So I guess what are some poor examples of, skills assessments? The whole theme of this is that they can be a very powerful tool if used the right way. With great power comes great responsibility. What are some terrible examples of how to use a tool like Vervo or skills assessments that have all these different question types? What's the most ineffective way that you've seen them used? And maybe Jen, you can chime in here as well.
Yeah, we do see this quite a lot. We see companies leveraging video, like Stacey mentioned, you don't want to overdo it, but we've seen companies just use video questions, video responses all throughout. So you'll have 8 to 15 video responses, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. I mean, someone's just going to sit there and talk to a computer for every question. It's kind of, you kind of lose a bit of the process there and really the engagement from the candidate. And we've seen, and studies have shown that candidates will lose interest if it's all video, and your completion rates can drop by 30%. So really avoiding all video assessments is something to really keep in mind. You don't want to do that. You want to make it engaging, and the best way is to really mix the question types. Text-based, a few multiple choice, maybe do have a video response, but towards the end of it, not at the beginning, because you're also going to ward off those people who actually, you want to complete it, but the first question is a video and they're sort of on guard already, defensive. Oh, I don't want to take video. Not everybody loves video. So we have to take that into consideration. Really mixing it up makes a huge difference in the engagement from the candidates.
Yeah, did you folks we all work at Vervo, obviously. Did you have to do a skills assessment when you applied? I mean, Jen, you've been here longer than any of us, so.
Yes, I did. And I'll tell you that, I always tell the story, and really quickly, I had been looking for work for 10 months at that time. I had been out of work for 4 years. I had a gap because I was raising my girls, ready to get back into the workforce. And it was tough. It was really tough. And I came across an ad for Vervo, and they said, do your interview right now. I'm like, what? Okay, clicked it. And I completed this assessment, and it was such a refreshing experience. I didn't have to write another cover letter, another resume. I actually got to talk about, I answered questions, real life scenarios, things, and how I would handle situations in customer success, customer service, right? And it was the quickest. I mean, I loved it. I mean, I was brought on the mission. I'm like, hiring needs to be this way. It allowed me to show what I can do. who cares that I had a 4-year gap? I kind of picked up a lot of skills, handling 2 kids, working side jobs, all of that. And then plus my previous experience. And so I was able to kind of showcase that and hired within a week and a half, which was mind blowing and exciting. So yeah. And we do this with everyone. Obviously, you guys have taken an assessment. So anyone who joins Vervo goes through the same process.
Did you have any video questions, Stacey?
I did. And my first role when I was brought on was also in customer success. So I was in a very customer facing role, and also having to do a lot of Zoom calls because it was, I had a dual role where some of it was global as well. So I'd have to be on calls with people from other side of the world. So it was really important for me to be able to feel confident in front of a camera and do and communicate through a screen. So actually being able to test that skill, and I guess how I presented, how I communicated was important for that role. It wasn't overused. I think I had one video question. Most of my job was actually over the screen and actually in an environment, but you get enough information from one video question. You don't need to overuse it. There's, the person's not really going to change from one video to the next. So one video question was definitely enough to ascertain my skills in that. But I also agree with Jen, and it also gave me a really good understanding of what the role involved, because there's only so much information that you can get from a position description or job advert, but actually doing or solving challenges or doing some of the work gives you a really good understanding of what you're getting yourself into. And it also sold the job to me, because I got off that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. This is a job that I get to do. So I think candidates, and the feedback that we get from candidates is very similar in that it shows them what they're getting themselves into, what it is like to work for that organisation, and also the sorts of calls they'll be taking or the sorts of job that they'll be doing, so that they're actually more engaged at the end of the process if it is a good reflection of the job that they're applying for.
Yeah. What alarmed me recently was I just hit a year at Vervo, and we were talking the other day about the features that we've got with our video questions, where you can see if someone's looking at a script or where their eye contact is going and all that kind of stuff. And I was trying to think back to, I was like, oh my god, was I reading off of a script? What did I do for my video answers? I did write them down, but then I was kind of off the cuff. But people do it all sorts of different ways, and it really it works for different people for different jobs. But all right, that's enough about us. Let's talk a little bit about, say, if you were in a hiring position, and this is sort of, we would like to see a bit of a demo here, Stace, but if you were kind of putting a skills assessment together today, what would you create? Let's try and put this into action for those attending and sort of show off the potential of, what the right range of questions is, etc.
Yep. Has my screen come up?
Yeah, it has.
Yes.
So we'd always recommend, well, not always, but what we've found to help with engagement and selling a role in organisation is actually starting the first question or starting the assessment with a video or any EVP information, or even a video of the recruiter or hiring manager at the start. So it actually shows the candidate, and they can get more information about the role or who they're interviewing with on the other side. So I start this with a video. This is just a video of Vervo. Obviously, this would be relevant for your role. We actually have customers who record their own videos talking like this, welcoming the candidates to the assessment, introducing themselves and explaining what the assessment involves. So it brings in that human element, and there's some really good feedback from candidates for that as well. We also have options to include video and audio in questions. So this is for a call center assessment. So they're actually listening to the call and having to summarize or choose the best response. This is a multiple choice question. And then again, we're actually getting them to do the job. So they're listening to this audio and typing out relevant notes for this call center environment assessment, because this is what they're going to be doing in the job. So we're actually testing those on the job skills. So that's written response. We have a few audio responses in here as well. I won't go through every single question, but we're actually getting them to record a response to the customer of how they're going to respond to this this customer who's angry because they've been on hold. So we're actually seeing how are they going to communicate to an angry customer. What are they going to say? Are they able to diffuse the situation? And I guess also the communication skills in this as well. And then we also have our CS simulator. So this is a real live simulation of a ticketing environment like a Zendesk, where candidates have questions or tickets on the left-hand side. They've got the information here. This is the candidate name. So this is to the candidate. Obviously, this is my demo account. On the right-hand side, they've got all of the knowledge bases. So the idea is they come in and they read this ticket, they find the relevant knowledge base that they have to, so they can learn how to answer the ticket, and then they select the right response and send that to the candidate. So we're actually testing real live on-the-job skills of how they're going to navigate a system. This also tests their ability to, their attention to detail, their ability to find the right information. Can they work under pressure because there's a time limit? As well as working in this ticketing environment. And some of our customers really like using this as well because it's testing those technical skills. We're not expecting every candidate to come in and actually have worked in this environment, but do they have the aptitude and technical skills to pick up a new technology quite quickly that they haven't used before, which is becoming really common for a lot of our customers working in digital environments. I would recommend a few more than 7 questions. This is just a dummy assessment that I put together. So generally would recommend around 8 to 12 questions. This is a little bit shorter just for purposes of today. But yeah, including a range of question types, and also providing material like audio or video for candidates to listen to and watch makes it a really engaging candidate experience and gets positive feedback.
Yeah. The CS simulator is so cool.
It is.
It's like one of our new features, and it's really cool to that is really what, the potential of skills assessments, I guess, is that realistic job preview, like creating a whole environment.
I also didn't, and now I just remembered, but I didn't put in the typing test. So we also have a live typing test. So I definitely recommend that for a lot of our, most roles these days require typing and require that technical skill. So including the typing test is important and a really cool feature as well.
Yeah. The bottom line is it gives you a 360 view of that candidate and their abilities. You can really mix it up. Like, why keep it all multiple choice when you have so much more you can leverage in the tool to just get more out of the candidate, right? To really understand their abilities. And so we're really proud of like the question types of features that we have available to our customers, because it really does make a difference in the insight that we obtain when candidates complete these assessments.
Yeah, Vervo is a great. I feel like I need to hold a little Vervo jar or something.
Right.
Let's get out of Vervo just slightly, but just talk broadly about skills assessments again in regards to, I don't know, let's myth bust a little bit here. It's a candidate short market in many markets at the moment, and the idea of putting, something that I'm sure a lot of hirers would see as potentially another barrier in the hiring process for candidates is, not something that many people are comfortable with when it's already hard to just get enough applicants in the pool for your, open role. What's our response to that? Maybe Jen, you can take this one. Like, how do you kind of fight back on that, and why what is the potential of skills assessments to help you in a candidate short market? Is it not just putting up an extra hoop for candidates to jump in?
It's a great question. It comes up a lot, especially in the current market. It's been happening. The knee-jerk reaction is eliminate the assessment. Who wants to put in an extra step, make candidates jump through hoops and all that? But that in itself is a mistake, right? Companies think that by removing it, they're speeding up the process, but huge mistake that can bring some unintended consequences, right? The data that we obtain, or the insight we obtain from those assessments, allows us to make really good decisions, right? And on the contrary, we would think that candidates, they're not going to want to jump through the hoops, but candidates will see this as a fair process, right? And want to be a part of a company who is fair and objective in their hiring process. Like, who wouldn't want to join a company who's actually looking to hire the best talent, right? Because if they hire the wrong talent, the company's going to pay for it, right? You want to ensure that you are finding the right people that are going to help your company grow, right? That the skills that these candidates bring are actually going to meet the demand of your company, right? And where it's headed. And if you're hiring the wrong people in a couple of months, your attrition is going to be high. People are going to leave, right? You're going to end up firing people, and that's just going to cost you a lot of money, right? And aside from that, the insight that we get from assessments, it's also a great way to help us onboard new candidates, right? The data we get there really helps us understand, where they need help in training, how to successfully onboard them, right? To make sure it's a really great experience for the candidate. And this goes back to the environment, to your, in the digital world, candidates will talk about the process. If it's a positive process, they're going to go ahead and they're going to write a review about it, right? And your company is going to be put out there, right? And so delivering a good experience, considering everybody, is super important. And the assessment really won't slow down your process. It really, if you leave the assessment there, position it at the right time, communicate the benefits to the candidates, like why should you complete this assessment? If it's going to eliminate a few steps of the process, and it can, in many instances, it really can, then communicate that, right? And chances are candidates are going to be more engaged. They're going to complete that assessment, get an idea of what it is to work for you and your company, and probably see through to the end, and you're going to get the best talent, right? And again, you're going to avoid those pitfalls of having to deal with attrition, and losing out on the best people for your company.
I might also add to that, because there isn't a misconception that it is bringing out, making the candidate pool smaller because you're putting in an extra step. But actually, when you're using a skills assessment, you're actually opening the funnel to so many different candidates who don't necessarily have the experience or have the buzzwords on the resume that generally talent acquisition would be looking for, because now you're actually opening the process to anyone who has the right skills. And that could be from a different industry or someone who hasn't worked in this role before. And so it's actually not eliminating candidates. It's actually giving you more opportunity to look further and cast a wider net, because now you're looking at just the relevant job skills rather than someone who's worked in that industry or that role before. And we have a lot of customers who do that, especially within like call center or the sales roles, or roles that have transferable skills that you don't need specific training for, and they actually bring them on and train them in the role, and they have really good success with that. So I guess it's just a mindset shift of, yes, it is putting in a step in the process, but it's also opening the pool to a lot wider, and can also make that process a lot shorter. And eliminate other steps in that process as well, like that phone screen or that interview.
Yeah.
And let's talk a bit about the steps in the process and the order of that. From what you've both sort of how you've seen people and companies implement skills assessments, where does it belong in the recruitment process? Is it something that should be used right at the beginning? Is it something that's more effective right at the end, just before hiring or interview? What have you found works?
So that's it really depends. There's no hard and fast right or wrong. We've had really good success with customers using it at the top of the funnel. So the first stage of the interview, the first stage of the recruitment process, and there is a lot of value in doing that, because now instead of looking at resumes and choosing people based on paper, you are, as I said before, opening that funnel to getting the best people who can actually perform the role. And essentially, you've got a short list based on people that you know are going to be good fit for the organization and a good fit for the job from that skills assessment. So using it at the top of the funnel, I definitely recommend. There's a lot of value there. In saying that, if there are roles who are, a little bit more senior, or they need a little bit more technical, it's unlikely that those candidates are going to straight away just do a skills assessment, or they want to speak to someone first, and that's totally fine. We also see a lot of customers use it at the middle or end stage of the process as well. So once they've had a phone interview, talk to the candidate a little bit, and then they'll send an assessment, or towards the end of the process where they've actually interviewed candidates, and it's the last step to make sure that they do have the relevant skills, and also showing them what the job is like, because there is only so much that you can communicate, what they'll be doing and what the job is like, but actually getting them to do it gives them more information and shows them, gives that first-hand experience. So it can really be used at any stage of the funnel, and we've seen success at all stages.
Yeah, it just comes down to the complexity and the seniority level of the role. It really is super flexible. It just depends where you're going to need it, where you place it. You have to be strategic about it. Some roles we know that, if we're thinking of like head of product at Silicon Valley, You might need a little courting. You might need them to buy in a little bit before you just throw them into an assessment, and that's fine. But the idea is you shouldn't exclude them from that. You shouldn't exclude that from the process because there really is valuable information you're going to gain.
We are running a little bit over our schedule here. So just for anyone who's watching and needs to drop off, there will be a recording that we'll send to you straight after this. But if you can stay with us live, stay with us. And we'll just go for another 5 minutes or so. Look, let's get into some sort of fast FAQs now then. Look, deadlines. Should they be used? Vervo, at least our platform, can, you can put timers on everything. You can put a deadline on the whole assessment. So what's your advice for people? Is it worth putting a deadline on, and how effective a time is and things like that for particular jobs?
Yeah, for sure. I think by default, we always have a deadline, and I think it makes sense to have one, right? Because you also want to make it, and again, setting the expectations in the job ad is very important. Letting candidates know that they're going to have a certain amount of time to complete it. An assessment should never, honestly, it depends again where in the funnel we're using it. But let's say we're using it at the top of the funnel, entry level, high volume, right? Maybe it shouldn't take more than 20 minutes. Communicate to the candidate, like, this shouldn't take you more than 20 minutes. And timers, we'd never want to overuse timers because we have to consider digital environments, right? I would only use a timer if really I'm trying to recreate pressure that they're going to feel in a specific scenario at work. Then I would apply a timer, right? So it really just depends on the role. But deadlines are okay. Just consider the time it's going to take to complete that assessment. If you're okay with candidates completing it, within a 4-day time limit, that's fine. They can come in, they can come out, and they can complete it. You can put a timer in one sitting. It all really depends on the urgency to fill that role as well, right? But again, it's communicating the expectations with the candidate so they know how much time they need to put into it. If they need to set aside some time on the weekend, whatever, just make sure that they're aware of that.
Yeah. What about things like cheating? Skills assessments are obviously something that people will be doing at home on their computer. What kinds of things are out there? And we can talk about Vervo, and then we can talk about we can compare it to any other skills assessment platform out there. But at least for Vervo, what measures have we got to sort of make sure that people aren't cheating?
Yeah, there's a few things in play. One is the way that we write questions. So we, generally, because they're skills questions, we're not asking questions where they can Google and just plagiarize or, get the answer from the internet. We're actually asking them to apply a skill, which is very hard to cheat with. And Vervo has two cheating detection technology or abilities as well. So we've got geolocation. So if someone signs in one computer and then a consecutive IP address quite quickly, there's a flag that raises. So sometimes people will share a link with someone else or share login details and say, hey, can you do this assessment for me? So we'll be able to pick that up. And then we also have plagiarism detection as well. So if there are responses coming through that all look the same or it's very similar, then we also have a flag to show that this could be someone that has plagiarized or these responses are very similar to other ones that are coming through. I think some other, and I don't know really too much about the other technologies, but some have recording devices, which I'm not 100% sure about in terms of
video proctoring. Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
So actually watch
so, yeah.
do the assessment, which could be privacy issues or things coming up. So I think we stay away from that by choice. So we've got geodetection and also plagiarism.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily knock the candidates out of, concession or out of the ranking. It just flags it, right? And then you look at
it's up to the employer what they want to do with it, whether they want to raise it, whether it's an issue for them. A lot of employers think about plagiarism, but it's actually less of an issue than they think. So not many people are actually going to, if they don't want to do an assessment or they think they can't do it, they don't do it. They don't get someone else to complete it for them because they're going to get found out at some point. It's less of an issue than some people think, but we definitely have measures in place for that peace of mind.
Yeah, got it. Cool. Again, the one that I'm sure you get all the time. How do you increase candidate completions of skills assessments? So obviously, you do your work, you try and get people to apply. Maybe you get a few people to, start the process and then don't finish their assessment and can't be ranked or graded?
Yeah, I think I'll go first, and Stacey, you can add. But I think honestly, it starts from the job description. It's not just about the assessment, it's how you communicate the role, right? Think more about the competencies that are going to be needed. Communicate that, not so much about a degree, just really what you're looking for. And then the process. Be transparent about what the candidate is expected to go through. What stages are they going to go through? Again, like I mentioned before, if the assessment will help them skip a few stages, well, then communicate that, right? And that kind of just at that point, candidates will choose to screen themselves in. If they really want to, they will go in and continue with the process, right? Then comes the assessment and how you build it. If you make this all video, chances are your completion rates are going to drop, right? So it's important to keep in mind the tips that we're sharing today. Make sure that assessment really, really is looking at the skills that are required for the role, right? For your company, what's important for them to be successful. And make sure you're creating these questions and making it really dynamic, make it interesting, engaging, right? Share about the company, the process, add a video at the beginning, like all of these things, consider that. And chances are you're going to get a lot of engagement. You're going to get completions from people who truly want to be a part of the process, who want to be a part of your company. And that's what's really most important, right? You want people who have the ability and they're going to showcase it, right? So that's the most important thing.
I think, yeah, how you communicate it to the candidates as well, that it's not just an assessment for an employer to assess the candidate. It's also a really good opportunity for the candidate to assess the role of the employer. So as Jen said, from the job description and from the advert, actually communicating what the point of the assessment is, because I think the word assessment to some people can be quite overwhelming, or they can be a little bit scared about that.
Yeah.
But even calling it an online job preview or changing the language to help with those candidates who might be a little bit averse to doing an assessment. And also, I often say to customers, and we have customers who are really good at understanding this now, is that we don't want every candidate to complete, because the idea of the assessment is to actually cut out people and only have people complete the assessment who are good for the job, who are really engaged in the process. And if they do, it's or if they do self-select out, the assessment is doing the job, because we don't want them to go through the assessment, they go through the interview, be employed, and then realize that the role is not for them. So there's a healthy level of candidate dropout that we want, and that means that the assessment is actually doing its job, and we only want candidates who are really engaged in the process to then complete the assessment, which might mean completion rates a little bit lower, but you've then got people who are really keen for the role, who are probably not going to leave the job when they get it, so it helps with attrition rates further down the track.
Yeah, such an interesting way to look at it. It's almost like it is, it can be a screening tool, but it's screening the right people in, not arbitrarily screening, the right people possibly out by what's not on their resume. And just before we get into the final wrap up with tips and best practices, just recapping, just, like to put you on the spot, to articulate, I'm sure you talk about this all day, for Vervo, let's talk about Vervo again, our favorite topic, but just with our skills assessment platform, what is different that we do, whether it's the AI, whether it's all of the stuff together, just overall, like what works about our approach, in our opinion, compared to a lot of the other ones on the market? What really makes us special, and why should everyone on this webinar who's maybe not using yet, but like what makes our skills assessments just that little bit better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, Verbal is just awesome. No, really, it's just there's a lot of features. Obviously, we deliver a lot of features that really allow you to measure those skills, right? It's one thing to have multiple choice and just ask and people can randomly check, but having the different features to really, like, again, like we said before, that 360 view, like understand if they can write an email, can they communicate, can they create a sales pitch, can they design, we also have Google spreadsheets and Google documents, can they manipulate these, this tech, do they know how to use it? These things are really important, and we kind of allow that with our platform. Other platforms out there, I mean, I can't speak to any specifically, but a lot of them do have multiple choice in text, great, and they have video, wonderful. But it's not enough, right? We really want to be able to test in every possible way we can and make it really fun and engaging. I think we've achieved that. On top of that, we have other features that really help to eliminate bias, RAI being one of those things, right? When it comes to grading, right? And when you have a big recruitment team, people can come in and start grading, a text response and, trusting that they're all going to be looking at the same exact thing and grading the same way, yeah, good luck with that. There's definitely going to be bias in that process. So what we've done with RAI, and I mean, we can kind of go into this whole thing with AI, and really it could take up another half hour to explain it. And I'm not going to go into the specifics or get too technical, but RAI specifically is machine learning. And it's not like rule-based where, you know, it's working based on what humans tell it to do. RAI is actually learning from candidates' performance, how they respond to questions, you know, how they're doing that, the actual content itself. You know, it learns from the grading preferences, how employers are grading those responses. It's really learning from all this data, and it doesn't have any identifying information in there in the mix. It doesn't know that the candidate's male or female. It doesn't know like if they went to college or not, what degree they have, their you know, work experience. It doesn't have any of that information, that bias information, right? Because that can create a lot of bias. It just understands, it just knows how they performed, and it ranks those candidates for you, right? And then it shows you how everyone performs in each skill, and it's up to the employer at that point to progress with those top performers, dive a little deep into things that they weren't so great at, whatever that is. They have all this information now that they can kind of use in the next part of the process to help them make the best decision. Sorry, I like went off and gave you a...
No, I'm very passionate. I don't have anything to add. So I'm gonna leave it.
Where do I sign up? Oh, wait. All right, let's quickly go through these best practices. Who wants to take us through it just to round things up for the day?
Yeah, I can. So there's best practices, and we can send this after as well. This is really any assessment in our library and any assessment that we create will be following these best practices. And this is what we've found to work the best for candidate completion, candidate feedback, and also to get the best from the assessment. So obviously we've talked about making it job related and interesting about skills. We don't want to be asking behavioral questions, you know, tell me about a time when, because that is that can be bring bias, and we're actually not getting candidates to do the job. So making it about skills. Don't make it all video or all multiple choice. Obviously, every job has a range of different communication ways, mediums. So we want to be able to make it really different for the roles. Include immersive type questions. So whether that's the typing test, a spreadsheet, a simulation, a coding challenge, to really simulate the working environment of the candidate. And then also don't overuse timers. So as Jen said, we want to use timers if it's a time pressured environment, or they have to do some tasks where they have, you know, time frames and time management, or of the overall assessment. But we want to make sure that we're giving every candidate a fair opportunity. We don't know what internet connection is like. Some candidates may need necessary adjustments if they, you know, if they need screen readers, or they have hearing impairment. So we want to make sure that it's fair to everyone with those accessibility things as well, which sometimes timers can disproportionately impact other candidates. As Jen's already mentioned, if we start with a video response, or candidate completion can drop by 17%. So we want to make sure that video responses and video questions are towards the end of the assessment, so candidates ease their way into doing the assessment. They've done a little bit of work, so that when they get to the video, they're already invested. If they're straight away shown a video, or they have to do a video, they're likely to drop out. So just following on that is easing into the assessment with easier questions, and then building difficulty. So we want them to feel more comfortable when they get into the more difficult questions. Just psychology 101, if they've invested a little bit of work into it, they're more likely to complete when it gets a little bit harder. And then, as we've already mentioned, we want to make sure that we're creating a really transparent process for the candidate, so they know that that in a stage of this process, they're going to have a skills assessment, and what the goal of that assessment is. So being really transparent and putting that in the advert. Some of our customers even outline the whole recruitment process. So if you are successful, you will have an assessment, then you'll have an interview, and then it will be reference checks, or whatever the process is. And then also, once they've completed the assessment, is letting candidates know whether they have or haven't been successful. How much detail you want to give into why or why not is totally up to the employer. But yeah, just getting back to candidates about their application status.
Amazing. Thank you. That is such an helpful list. So yeah, we'll pop that up somewhere and send it out. Stacey and Jen, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you all as well. I know we went a little bit over time, but there's just such great content to talk about. So what can you do? This recording will be sent to everyone who attended and couldn't make it. And if you know of anyone, I've been getting this question a little bit, that would be interested in watching this webinar after the fact, you can share the exact page where you signed up for, or you can share that link that we send you. Yeah, they can sign up and watch it forever, anytime they want. So send it around, share it, and make sure that people are getting the most out of skills assessments. That's what this whole session was about. We're going to be back with another webinar in 2 weeks. That will be on why skills matter more than degrees, with Christian Serrera from Opportunity at Work. So we'll see you then. We'll send that email invite out very soon. But until then, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure that we'll see you all again very soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.